Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 30th of May, and joining me on this edition are Mark Botwright,
a 9-year-old trapped in a man's body,
news editor Mark Hodgkinson,
good thing these guys aren't lumberjacks,
audio reviewer Ed Selley,
Chevy Nova,
and us editor Steve Withers.
Do you like penicillin on your pizza?
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Steve, you seem a little bit off at the minute. Are you feeling alright, mate? You seem like you've given up and just had enough.
Lost all hope.
Lost all hope? What's wrong with you?
No, I got married on Tuesday, so I'm a married man.
Makes sense.
Again.
Your life is over.
Congratulations.
Well, this is actually quite awkward because my invite clearly got lost in the post.
Oh, the truth. Nobody got invited, mate.
Yeah.
It was a spectacularly cheap wedding, so.
KFC for the dinner?
we went to a fish and chip shop, actually.
MC on Dolby Atmos.
The caveat that by saying it was the Scallop Shell, which is voted the best fish and chip restaurant in the country, in Bath, and it is very nice. It's not your local chippy, but that's where we went.
Mushy peas.
Yes, awesome mushy peas. Actually, I had a really nice piece of cod in batter, and some fantastic. It was a delicious meal. So.
You remember more of the meal than you do of the ceremony.
It's only just in the registry office. It was all very simple. It was very nice. And, it was obviously a shame that the previous event was ended up being all celebration, no actual wedding, but it was nice. And the weather was gorgeous, so we lucked out there. It was a beautiful sunny day.
Honeymoon?
No, I was back at work on Wednesday.
This is it.
I was
the
back
mushy peas was the high point.
back online by Tuesday afternoon, answering questions, and then we went to a pub quiz in the evening, and we won it. So there you go.
And they say romance is
let
dead.
you win.
To keep it nice and simple, you don't need all the family there and all the rest of it, and then the fight in the car park and stuff, you can do without all that.
It's not a Scottish wedding.
It's tradition to have a fight in the car park with the two families. Anyway, this is the last podcast until the 20th of June. I'm going to say we're taking our summer holidays. I'm taking my summer holidays. So that means nobody's around to record the podcast because nobody else can do that. So we're not here for the next 2 weeks. But we do have some interviews for you. So the first interviewee is Steve.
So the first interview, Phil, will be Dado Valentic, who is a colour scientist, which he'll explain at length in the interview itself. But he worked on Marco Polo. Basically, he's a colourist. He worked on Marco Polo and also on Exodus, Gods and Kings. Very interesting interview with Dado. And the second interview will be with Stephen Auld from Dolby, who will be talking at length about Dolby Vision. Yeah,
so Data's not talking at length. We only managed to get 20 minutes, a busy schedule that he had, but we're grateful that we got the 20 minutes because it is interesting. And I think the Dolby Vision interview is about 45 minutes, so you'll get one a week for the next 2 weeks, released on a Monday, and we will be back on the 20th of June for the podcast. So moving on, 5-star reviews and Beer Hunter 123. This is Ed's. This will be your pseudonym, is it? Beer Hunter 123.
No. I haven't been boosting our ratings artificially.
Okay.
I'm relying on real people or something approaching real people.
Okay. Informative.
Ed's name is Beer Found, I think, actually.
Informative and amusing every week. A great balance of chat, reviews, and opinion. You have made me spend far too much. That's a classified. That's nothing to do with us.
Unless it's all of Mark's old cooking tips. Just burnt down his kitchen.
In fact, now's the perfect time to republish them with what the BBC's doing.
Yeah.
There's a gap in the market, Mark.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I'm just doing snack gadgets right now.
That's not a euphemism, is it?
No.
Count Jedi, AV to Roadkill, it's all covered. What a great podcast, from basic to the more advanced, something for everyone.
Adam Jack Drew even says, amusing and insightful. I walk to work looking like a complete
missed out the word idiot.
Laughing at some of the banter. Well done, and keep up the good work, like Steve's magnificent transcribing skills, for example.
Yeah, you want to read some of his reviews.
Witty 555, interesting, informative and entertaining news and chat about all things AV and some cat talk. Talking of which, mine's just come in if you wanted to know that, Winnie.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, Mr. Botwright, we don't have one for you. You can repeat one if you like.
No, I'd rather not, thanks.
Or you could even give one yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the name that I choose may not be repeatable.
What are you talking about? It'd be Shenmue something.
It would be Shogun Assassin 745 or something.
You know me too well.
So thank you very much for the 5-star reviews. Keep them coming. We'll keep reading them out at the end of the month. And current competitions, who am I going to go to? Let's go Mr. Botwright.
Right, current competitions. We've got the Noon VR headset, and that one's open to all members until 30th of June. And we actually have some previous winners now.
Woo.
Yes, woo indeed. The Pump Audio Mega Giveaway first prize went to Lauren Old, and we have a couple of runners-up prizes, which went to Bridget Willard and S. Bonnet.
Okay, so that's the competition. So let's move on. Hardware news and SLED. Is that right?
Cled. Or C-LED.
C-LED. Sounds like a glam.
C-LED.
Glam
Sounds
rock
like a rapper.
band. No, glam rock band from the 70s, I think. SLED, isn't it? With a ton of sled.
I don't know. At least some of them would be in prison now if they were a 70s rock band. That seems to be part of the course.
Right, so C-LED, we saw this back in 2012 at CES. It was a concept demonstration, and
nearly 4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago, and we never saw it again. There is a video with you looking young but still bald, Steve, on the site and on the article. So this was interesting technology at the time, but then it just disappeared off the face of the earth, and suddenly it's reappeared, Mark.
It has. It is back, courtesy of. We must say that this isn't an announcement from Sony about a new TV. It was actually their commercial department who put out a release about this canvas-style display technology, and they've renamed it Cledis now, which sounds like some nasty disease that you wouldn't want to catch. But yeah, it's based on the same technology you saw at CES 2012. At the time, Sony was talking it up as a competitor to OLED, or even outstrip OLED in some ways, in the fact that it'll go totally a lot brighter. Like OLED, it's a self-emitting technology, so it can go completely switch off. Doesn't require a backlight, therefore go really black. And this thing they've announced, it's the thing they're going to be showing is a huge canvas display made up of tiny little LEDs, which are 0.003 millimeters squared in size. It has the capacity for 140% of sRGB. I haven't calculated that into Rec 2020, but it can't be that far off what we're seeing in the TVs at the moment. It's 10-bit color depth, near 180-degree viewing angle. And the canvas is made up of smaller panels, so each individual panel is 403 millimeters by 453 millimeters, and they stick them all together, and it'll be used in commercial applications. So we made the leap that possibly, since this technology,
don't drag us into it. You did.
I made the leap that with it being ready for to be put out commercially in the first quarter of 2017. That maybe, just maybe, Sony would adopt this for their TVs as a competitor to OLED and relaunch themselves to the top of the pile. Now, it is speculation because Sony, of course, have been quite conservative with their TV business now, and it's all about the bottom line. But yeah, it was something we'd really like to see, or I would really like to see. I will speak for myself. As an interesting competitor to OLED and the successor to LED. So I don't know. We might see it at IFA. We might not. We might see it at CES 2017. We might not. But it's interesting technology.
It all comes down at the end of the day to how much it costs to produce this stuff. Yeah. And I guess the plus point here is that their professional department has taken this technology on and obviously developed it over the last 4 years to a standard now where they're going to introduce it to the market. But if it's the professional side of the market, you're looking at 100, 200 grand easy.
It'll be phenomenally expensive
for these screens used for the advertising. So even scaling that down, you're still talking about a lot of money. And the thing is, it looks like, certainly looking from the outside at the minute, if Sony were to do that, then it would perhaps maybe kick things on display wise, because I guess it goes against the depressing news that obviously Samsung are sticking with LCD TVs. I mean, they're calling it quantum dot and they're going to expand it and all the rest of it. But basically, at the end of the day, we're still talking about old technology that they're still trying to improve and still trying to fix the flaws in. OLED is still extremely expensive. You just have to look at the prices and the availability. Availability of OLED at the minute, it seems to be nowhere has them. And they've all sold out the new models at the moment, Steve, and trying to get a review sample is like trying to get blood out of a stone.
I've sneaking suspicion the reason that there haven't been any review samples of the E6. I don't think the G6 and V6 have even been released in this country yet, but certainly the E6, they've been selling them as fast as they can make them. And I guess that's been a priority rather than dishing out review samples, which is a shame, because we'd obviously love to see it, having seen them at various shows. But you're right, Phil, it is. It would be really, really nice if Sony could come along with something as an alternative to certainly LCD and as an alternative to OLED as well, as long as they could deliver it at some sort of affordable price. And I think that's probably the issue. That was certainly evident when we saw them 4 years ago. When we saw it 4 years ago, it was impressive technology. It looked great, but they were adamant. They were very clear this is only a prototype. We're just testing it. And I suspect the problem at the time was they couldn't make it in any way affordable. And it's possible that's still the case if it's only going to be a professional product. But it would be really nice to have something else shake up the market, because at the moment all the pressure was really on LG, who are the only ones that are investing, at least publicly, investing in this technology in OLED and making all the panels. And if they've got problems with getting enough panels for their units, and everyone else is buying them off LG Display as well, then that's only going to filter back to making it difficult for Panasonic or for Philips or whoever else wants to do an OLED TV, is trying to buy the panels off of LG. There's a definite bottleneck in the fact that we've only got one manufacturer making them in the entire world, basically.
I think one of the problems with OLED has been the conditions you need to make it in, hasn't it? And it needs to be sterile with it being organic.
They are still incredibly difficult to make, aren't they?
So whether this would be easier or not, and tooling up the factories, we don't know, do we? But it's speculation again. But it might be easier to make them because they need such sterile environments to make them in.
Because OLED is a living material.
Yeah. Whereas this is
feed your telly, don't you, every morning?
like you had to gas your plasma, you got to feed the TV.
Yeah.
A little bowl of water, just in case. Honestly, don't put water on your television. That would be a very bad idea, just to make that clear.
Yeah, oops, that £6,000 OLED's just gone up in smoke, Steve.
It'd be interesting to see, because although 0.003 millimeters sounds very small, it could be interesting whether they can actually, how small a screen size they can actually make using CLED. I'm trying to remember what the screen was. So I think it was
55, wasn't it?
Was it 55?
It was 55 inch and it needed 6 million LEDs. So that was just a 1080p one, wasn't it? So you had 4 times that for an Ultra HD set. So that's a lot. That's a lot of little LEDs.
A lot of LEDs. I mean, that can't be easy to make, can it? Putting each tiny one in.
Not by hand.
When you go, very steady hand. No, I mean, when you think about the production, I mean, I remember, this is years ago, but I remember going to see Toy Story 2. It was being shown digitally. I think it was the first digital screening. It was in London, and it was using DLP. And this was back in 1999 or 2000, and I was explaining to my friend what DLP was, and I said, it's little tiny mirrors, millions and millions of little tiny mirrors. And he looked at me like I was insane. And sometimes you think, how do they make some of this stuff, some of this nanotechnology, these tiny little LEDs or tiny little mirrors? You think that's bloody clever, really. And then deliver it at anything approaching a cost-effective price. And people still moan, so there you go.
Right, let's move things on. Let's go Mr. Botwright, Xbox 1.5 rumours.
Yes, this came by way of Kotaku, who verified it by a couple of sources, and then also there was an update from Polygon, and it seems like Microsoft are readying 2 new consoles, revisions to the Xbox One. How much of this is to do with PlayStation 4 and their Neo, their own kind of mid-gen refresh, and how much is to do with VR isn't fully clear, but we've got a code name. And as always, these things always come with cool code names. Scorpio now.
Why don't they just call them that when they release them?
Yeah.
I know. And this is, well, the weird thing is that, like, if you consider something like the Nintendo NX, that's been rumored for so long that people now just so associate that with the console. But I always wonder what the board meeting's like when someone gets to come up with the code name. Who puts forward these things? I'm imagining something like one of the early apprentice meetings where they come up with team names. But we've got Scorpio. Sounds like it will be even more powerful than Neo, this is sounding a bit like a superhero movie now.
I was just thinking that.
I think one of the biggest things to come out of this is that could come with Oculus Rift support. So it definitely sounds like VR has pushed things on because this generation of consoles was quite conservative, even back in 2013. So the likelihood that they would last for, kind of 7-8 years, they're always going to look long in the tooth long before that. So supposedly Microsoft would like to broker a deal for that. And it kind of points towards this more iterative approach, of just incremental upgrades to consoles which last for, a few years rather than, try to push it beyond kind of 5-6 years. What the ramifications will be long term, it's hard to say, because obviously they'll plan to put in a certain plan around forwards and backwards compatibility, because you don't want to kind of completely fragment your own market. But of the two console revisions, Scorpio's the one that we probably won't hear about at E3, because with the tentative release period being put in the ballpark of late 2017, it would be a hell of a long run up to that. But we should hear about a slim version of the Xbox One. So with the price cut for that, maybe we could see the same for PlayStation 4. Might get details of the new Sony Neo, might not. But all things considered, it looks like quite an interesting E3.
Okay, so we'll look forward to hearing more about Xbox 1.5 and PS4 called Neo, or
PS4K is what people have been calling
PS4K. That was the one.
That's more catchy.
Yeah, I think that works.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's move on. Ultra HD TVs. We've got another one in. It's a Samsung, and this time it's flat.
Yay! Yes, flat. As you probably are aware from previous podcasts, Samsung's SUHD range this year does include both flat and curved alternatives, apart from the flagship model, the 9500, that is only available curved, which is a little bit annoying. But the KS9000, the sort of flagship edge-lit version, that's available as a curved, the KS9000, and the KS8500, which is flat. And we've already reviewed the KS7500, which is the curved entry-level SUHD model. And this is the flat entry-level SUHD model, the KS7000. And as we have been saying, and as Samsung had told us originally, I mean, from my experiences to date, they are identical. I mean, aside from the shape of the screen, obviously. Otherwise, it's exactly the same television. Its performance is identical. Its architecture and design is identical. I mean, they are basically the same TV. So I think that's good in the sense that if you want flat, you've got the option of flat, and if you want curved, you've got the option of curved, and you aren't losing anything between the two other than the shape of the screen. The only feature that is on the curved screens that's not on the flat screens is auto depth enhancer, but that's a feature that was designed for the curvature of the screen, and therefore it would be no point having it on the flat version. But otherwise, it's a really good, solid entry-level television. We got the 55-inch version, but there are obviously a number of screen sizes, and it does everything you could want for a 4K Ultra HD TV. It's Ultra HD Premium certified, which means it can deliver up to 1,000 nits of peak brightness. It's got a 10-bit panel, and it can hit over 9% of DCI-P3. And in terms of general use, it's a fantastic TV. It's got a nice picture. Local dimming is very good. Color accuracy is good, particularly with X709. It's got a really interesting, the new smart platform has been revised quite a bit by Samsung this year, making it significantly different from last year, actually, and a big improvement. It's simpler, it's got more recommendations, but it's easier to access what you want to access and find what you want to find. The auto detection system works very well, so if you plug a new device into the HDMI, it detects it, and if it's in its database, and most things are, then it basically detects it, identifies it, mentions, names it as such on the input, and then you can do basic controls using the remote. The smart controller is very effective, nicely designed, sits in the hand really well, very comfy to hold. The design itself is a little bit prosaic. It's for Samsung, it's a bit boring. It's kind of looks like any other generic TV these days with little feet at either end. So obviously there's no swiveling involved. It's got feet, so you're going to have a platform or a surface on to put it on that's going to be basically the entire width of the television. So bear that in mind. But otherwise, it's a solid, very good. I'd say entry level, but obviously there are lower models that aren't SUHD. But as far as the SUHD range goes for Samsung this year, this is the entry level model. So if flat is your preference, and for a lot of people that is the case, then this is definitely worth looking at as an alternative to the curved versions.
What's it priced in relation to the 7500? What's the price?
Let me just.
Are they?
And again, it's edge lit, bottom lit, top lit.
It's edge lit.
So
at the sides.
At the sides, okay. And
how
did it hold up with HDR stuff then?
Well, as with the 7500, when you're watching normal content, SDR content, the local dimming is very good, and when you set the backlight to a relatively low level, very good even backlight and very good black levels and minimal haloing. Once you go to HDR, clearly everything's jacked up to the max, and then it becomes more apparent. Although, having said that, I've got to say that I actually thought, and I wasn't doing a direct comparison, so I thought the HDR looked slightly better on the flat version than it did on the curved version. I was getting less of the of sort of because of the way the backlight is positioned, you can get bright sections in the in black bars and letterbox films, which are the majority of the HDR films I've got seem to be letterboxed. That seemed less apparent on the flat version than it did on the curved version. So that's a positive, I guess. It might just be my imagination. I wasn't comparing the two directly.
I've always found the light distribution better on the flat ones than the.
And I think that might well be the case. I mean, that's probably goes completely against what Samsung was saying a couple of years ago when they first introduced curved screens. But I think the light distribution did seem better on the flat version to me.
It's harder to bend light, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah, quite. And yes, I mean, I think everyone will agree that when you're talking about HDR, edge lighting is not the best approach to it for obvious reasons. Having said that, I do think that the way Samsung are distributing light behind the panel, given its edge lit, is actually very effective. And for the majority of HDR content, it works really well. The only times when it's more obvious is if you've got like a dark scene. So, for example, the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road, there's some scenes in some tunnels where you've got sort of a lot of darkness, but then shafts of light, and then you get the columns of light more obvious. They're more obvious, and you got sort of light patches in the black borders. But for the majority of content, actually, it looked really good. And so, I think if you're looking for a competitively priced Ultra HD 4K TV with HDR, this is definitely worth considering. And you do have the option of curved or flat if you have a preference, and which is also nice to have. And like I said at the beginning, it's a real shame that they don't give you that choice with the flagship, which should be coming soon. And that's got a full array backlight. So it would be nice if the 9500 was also available as a flat option.
Yeah, but they're in too deep now, having expended the blood and treasure that they have on telling us that we all need to be curved. It would be a massive, and probably unpalatable climb down.
Yeah,
actually, here's a flat one.
What was really obvious was at CES. A lot of the meetings that we go to are actually off the show floor and in areas that are also shared with dealers and buyers. Because it's not just the press that goes to CES and tells the world what's going on. All your buyers for all your major retailers and everything else, they all go out to CES. And they have much better free food and free drink, and they're treated a lot better than the press are. And they have huge areas off the show floor where all the models are available to see. These dealers and buyers can go around and choose which models they're going to have in their ranges in their shops and so on. And we got the opportunity to walk into the Samsung's room, Steve, didn't we? And not allowed to take any video or anything else, but the thing that hit me straight away was the split was 50-50 flat to curve, which I found really surprising for Samsung.
It was not the case last year, I don't think.
No, there were very few flat models compared to the curves, yet it was a 50-50 split, and that really stood out for me when we had a quick walk around that room.
Yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion we'll see a lot more flat and a lot less curve next year. I mean, you're right, Ed, it'd be a massive loss of face for Samsung to say, actually, you know what, curve hasn't really panned out, we're going back to flat. They'll do a gradual progression, but certainly anecdotally, I don't think, if you read the forums, for example, and these are people, TV enthusiasts, our readership, there's very little love out there for curve. Most people prefer a flat screen. I'm reminded of when I was at BT Sport, and they were using Samsung TVs in the room we were in to show the Ultra HD broadcast that they were doing at the time. They were flat models, and I said, I see you're using flat models. He goes, yeah, well, put more pictures of flat. I don't want curved lines on the screen and stuff like that. So clearly, even the professionals had no interest in using flat curved models. So I would be wouldn't be surprised at all to see next year's models skewing heavily towards flat. I just wish that they would give the option of a flat version for the flagship model. And in answer to your question, Mark, about pricing, interesting. If you go into Currys or John Lewis to buy the KS 7500, the curved model, it will cost you £1,699. That's for the 55-inch. If you go for the 55-inch KS 7000, the flat model, £1,499. So you save yourself 200 quid as well. So that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, totally.
Get the KS 7000.
I think curved screens are going to go down as and also run, when we look at the technology in terms of broadcasting technology and TV technology as it's evolved over the years, I think it'll be one of those little oops, what were we thinking of? So that neatly brings us on to obviously the Euros and the Olympics coming up, and round about the Olympics and the Euros, more the World Cup actually than the Euros, is TV innovation and new TV technology being tested. And we've seen everything from widescreen SD broadcasting to 3D to HD being introduced, and now obviously 4K, and the Olympics in 2020, because they're in Japan and NHK are the national broadcaster in Japan, even rumours that is going to be shot in 8K. So we've seen a lot of TV innovation. Steve, give us the gists of, because for a long time it was 4:3, and we didn't get colour until, what was it, the early 70s? Late 60s?
Steve's 40th birthday.
Yeah.
It was my actual year I was born that we got colour TV. Yeah, I mean, if you go back, what's interesting, I mean, for those of us of a certain age, and I think that's most of the people here, we remember the older days of television when it was, a standard definition PAL system 4:3. But if you go back far enough, when TV started in this country, which was in the 1930s, mid 1930s, 1936, BBC began live broadcasting television, and that used a 405 line system. So it was actually 377 actual lines of information, interlaced using 50 hertz with 25 frames per second. So that was what was launched. And that was what they used in the beginning. That was actually called, at the time, high definition, because the previous system was 240 lines. So they almost doubled the number of lines, and it was high definition television. Even back then, they were using that phrase. And that system, interestingly, continued to be used right through until, I think, 1985, before they actually turned it off, because it used a VHF signal, and there was wider geographic coverage. So there's some parts of the UK that still didn't get the UHF coverage of PAL until the mid 80s, and that's when they actually finally turned that system off. I think when we talk about some, I'm talking about tiny little islands north of Scotland that didn't have any broadcast at the time. But that system, that 405 line system, was used in the UK right through until the 60s. It wasn't until 1964 BBC Two was launched, and that used PAL, which is the system that we continue to use today. And that's a 625 line system with 576 active lines interlaced again, using 50 hertz. That didn't come into the mid-60s. And BBC Two, again, was the first to broadcast PAL in colour in 1967. So when the 66 World Cup happened in this country, we were still predominantly using, BBC One and ITV were still using 405 line black and white. It wasn't until the following year that we had colour PAL on BBC Two. And then 1969, BBC One and ITV switched to PAL colour as well. So, from 69 onwards until, for the next 30 years at least, that was a dominant technology in this country. We had colour, PAL.
Am I right in thinking that David Attenborough was behind bringing colour?
Yes, he was a controller of BBC Two back then.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And the reason that they started broadcasting Pot Black, the snooker, was entirely because of colour broadcasting. Yep. It was, something that clearly they could use for testing and show off the whole colour aspects. I mean, it must have been interesting watching football in black and white. Teams had quite similar shirts. I guess they must have deliberately made shirts, not so much colour different, but also design different.
Away strips.
Yeah.
For the TV.
Mm. So they could differentiate the teams in black and white. So, so 4:3, standard definition, PAL, colour, mono, audio. That was it from late 60s right through until the mid 80s. I mean, we had the same system. The only real innovation in that period that came along was teletext, which came along in the 70s. Do you guys remember waiting, if you missed the page, you have to wait for it to get rebroadcast?
The football results, yeah.
I used to sit watching that.
But, and because it was the Scottish results I wanted, I had to sit through 7 or 8 pages of, because they went through all the English divisions and then all the non-professional divisions that before they even came to the Scottish Premier.
So it was done in order of quality then.
Yeah, you're probably right there, Ed.
Sorry, that was a low blow, but
well, I'm going to stop bullying Steve now, and I'm going to start bullying you.
All right.
I think it's probably, for any younger listeners out there, it's probably hard to imagine an age when teletext was considered, that was the information technology age for us, waiting for the same page to be broadcast, literally broadcast. I mean, it was more robust in the way that if you had, you'd have millions of people watching the same thing, and it didn't slow it down because it was being broadcast. But having information in being broadcast one after the other. I mean, there were TVs that later came along with small memories in them, so you could actually save the pages and then find the one you wanted quicker. But it being broadcast, you had 3 channels until 1982, wasn't it? When
Channel 4,
Yeah.
because the UH system only actually allowed for 4 channels, so we only had 4 channels. We had 3 until 82, and then we had 4 until I think it was 97 when Channel 5 came along using spare frequencies on the existing channels. But we had, so hardly any channels. They didn't broadcast 24 hours a day. There was no internet. Text was the closest that we had. If you wanted to find out the football results, and you didn't want to wait till the next scheduled news program, the only way to find it out was literally to go onto teletext, wasn't it? There was no other way of finding this information.
Well, there was this other invention, Steve, called radio.
Well, no, but again, that's you're assuming that there's a. What I mean is, you could use radio, TV, but you had to wait to a news broadcast for someone to tell you what the results were, or watch
Live. Then
teletype. Remember the teletype on
I miss that noise. I still think that final score. I know that there's no requirement for it to make that noise anymore, but it bloody well should.
Yeah. What was it? It used to come through because Saturday afternoons used to be fantastic when I was growing up. Because the whole family would go and do the shopping, and it'd be me and my grandpa and my youngest brother. We would be sitting watching the wrestling on the afternoon. What was it? World of Sport or something, or Dickie Davis?
Yeah, World of Sport.
Yeah, and Saturdays used to be brilliant for that kind of thing. And then you had the like you say, Steve, you had the football results with the ticker running away in the background, and
followed by the pools.
Followed by the pools news, yeah. Pools news.
Did you know Jimmy Hill was responsible for Dickie Davis being called Dickie Davis? Because Dickie Davis isn't called Dickie Davis.
I only knew that because I watched a documentary about him the other night.
Snap.
Sorry, his name's not Richard Davis, then?
No, I can't remember what it really is, but Jimmy came up with the idea it should be called Dickie Davis because it was more catchy.
Yeah. So, I mean, once we hit the 80s, then, obviously talking about TV and quickly, that's where things really started to take shape because, believe it or not, HD TV was available in the late 80s.
Well, the first World Cup, at least, that was recorded and broadcast in high definition was the Italian 90. That was actually done by RAI, which is the Italian broadcaster, and NHK. They did test recording and broadcasting in HD. So that's back in 1990.
Yeah, and on YouTube you will find stuff that was shot in the late 80s in HD, and obviously you can watch it now on YouTube in HD. It's really quite interesting.
Yeah, there's official FIFA movies that are really good.
Well, a lot of that stuff was shot on film. So some of those FIFA movies look amazing. I remember they broadcast a lot of them when was the World Cup? 2014. They showed all those FIFA movies in high def, and some of the stuff they were showing looked stunning because it was shot on film back in the 50s and 60s. Don't forget, obviously, up until 86, we were all listening to stuff in mono, and then we had NICAM stereo coming along, which was a digital format, which is another first.
That was such a big shot in the arm for home cinema. It was my first home cinema system revolved around a NICAM stereo VCR. Piped into an amplifier and a couple of speakers.
That's where home cinema began for me. I mean, I rented a VHS NICAM stereo tape deck. Had a 4:3 color telly.
Well, the best one was the Mitsubishi VHS machine, and it had VU meters and stuff on it as well. It was really advanced for the time.
A friend of mine came around and I plugged it into my NAD's stereo amplifier and a couple of mission speakers, and he came around. I put on a Roger Waters VHS tape. It was Radio Chaos music videos, and they were in stereo, NICAM stereo. Put that on, and we were gobsmacked. It was just, wait a minute, this is a whole different level, and that's where it started. It was started in '86.
I mean, all through the '90s, it was a case of the sound just got bigger and bigger and bigger because Laserdisc then went to Dolby Digital and then DTS. And I always remember I was so into the audio for a long time because the TVs were tiny. I mean, even back then when I had probably the best system I had, it was on a 32-inch widescreen TV.
Yeah, 32 was huge back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To be fair, they were huge. I mean, that was in part of the issue.
The tubes, yeah, and I'm glad I was.
There was I imagine a 32-inch CRT widescreen at the dump the other day when I was dropping some rubbish off, and you just forget how much television was required to support that screen.
Yeah, I'm just glad I wasn't a TV reviewer back in the day because
Oh god.
It's about 80 kilos, weren't it?
oh jeez,
Massive.
can you imagine them getting them? Oh, and unboxing it on your own, guys. You couldn't do that,
No,
could you?
God, you couldn't. You physically couldn't move some of those TVs
No,
on your own.
no,
It'd be
you
impossible.
couldn't do that.
I mean, that
so-
was the big shift after sound. You're right. Sound was head of picture for quite a long time, and it was a move to widescreen and then high definition. That was
Well,
important.
we were first to go. Europe was first to go. Certainly, the US took a long time to go to widescreen. And the other thing was that we brought in, or certainly for the bigger screen TVs, rear projection became a big thing for a long time. And I remember shelling out £4,000 on a Pioneer widescreen rear projection TV that was the size of a piano. It was massive. It blocked out the light in the living room. It sat in front of the window and blocked out all the light, which obviously if you're watching TV is great, but this thing was massive. We needed a special piano guys. I didn't tell the guys that were delivering it. They said, oh, it's free delivery. I said, oh, great. I didn't tell them it's 6 flights of stairs on a spiral staircase to get up to the flat. And then obviously when we were moving out of that place, I had to get the, I forget, is it Pickford's, the removal firm? They had to send their piano team round to pick it up and take it down the stairs again.
I mean, they were capable of great results, but most people's enduring memory of them was in like pubs and stuff where they'd been set up by someone who'd been on the source for 6 or 7 years.
Well, funnily enough, that TV, when I sold it to one of the local pubs. When I had to get rid of it because I was moving down this way where I am now, and there was no way I could store it and all that. I actually sold it to the local pub, and it was there for about 10 years afterwards.
It's interesting that TV broadcasting sort of remained the same for so long, but then once things started to change, the change was pretty rapid. So mid-80s, you start moving to stereo sound. By the 90s, we're moving into high definition and widescreen TV. So 16:9 aspect ratio. And then, by the late 90s, we hit digital, and then everything changes. Basically, you go, the first, I think the first digitally broadcast tournament for the World Cup was the 1998 tournament in France. By then, we'd had digital satellite digital broadcasting, and then pretty soon after we had terrestrial digital broadcasting. So not only did you get widescreen, not only did we start to see the advent of high definition, but obviously we suddenly went from 4 channels or 5 channels to hundreds of channels, and problem didn't become what we got to watch, but we had too much to watch. Although I've got to say a lot of those channels were rubbish, and unlike the BBC, who at least said, okay, we're introducing a few more channels, but we're going to concentrate on picture quality and with minimal compression, a lot of the channels that arrived looked far worse than they ever could have done in analog.
The early days of Sky, terrible. Just slightest bit of rain. And you got speckles all over the screen, and then the picture just disappeared if it got heavy rain. And that was for a long time as well, until we got proper, until they really improved the LNBs and the delivery system. But early days of Sky, and I did buy into Sky very early on, the image quality was terrible.
It's funny looking at Sky, because I was reading about their history, and you kind of forget, because they're so massively dominant now in terms of sport, and particularly football. As a broadcaster, obviously not the World Cup and the European Championships, because they're saved for mass broadcasters like the BBC, public broadcasters like the BBC and ITV, but certainly for things like the Premier League, they've dominated that since '92 when they paid, what was it, something like 304 million quid back then. I mean, I know they're paying billions now, but that was a lot of money in 1991.
Well, the other thing was when the BBC and ITV covered football, and even international broadcasters for these big tournaments, there was 3 cameras, 4 cameras at the most. And it was Sky that really pioneered the whole use of pitch side cameras and 18 odd cameras and slow-mo and all the rest of it, and instant replay from about 6 different angles and goal line technology and all the rest of it. They really pioneered it and kicked it on, and the BBC and ITV and everybody else had to catch up with them. They really did push it.
I mean, they used it as a gateway to get subscribers, because they were really, really struggling. And both, but obviously, if you go back far enough, you had Sky and you had BSB, British Satellite Broadcasting, BSB. They were both in massive trouble for years, hemorrhaging cash. Hence the reason why they merged and became the Sky B.
Yeah, a merger in the same way that the knight who'd had his arms and legs cut off in Homegrown. Yeah, we'll call it a draw.
It's the merger in the same way as Germany and Austria in 1938, I think.
When I used to commute into London for years and years and years near Willesden Green, I mean, obviously, we're talking this century. There was a house that still had a squarial on it. I can only assume that they
weren't getting any broadcast then, were they?
No, just kept it for prosperity. Yeah,
it's a museum piece. So anyway, yeah, they were struggling even after the merger in inverted commas. They still struggled. It was football that basically saved them and gave them a subscriber base. And you're right, Phil. I mean, whilst you may not necessarily approve of a single broadcaster having a near monopoly on football broadcasting in the UK, they did use that monopoly to push technology in high definition, multiple cameras, replays.
I mean, things like
3D and the PVR. Even the PVR with Sky Plus was something that came via them.
Well, the big red button thing. That was a big thing back then. Red button, where you could actually follow certain players, and there was a camera would follow a player for a certain length of time, and then they would change to another player. So
some player sort of picking his nose and scratching his balls.
Yeah,
watching what he was doing.
Yeah, but if you were interested in that kind of thing, and the other thing was like the catch up. So you would have, and it'd be on a loop. So if you'd missed the first half, you could quickly go and watch 5 minutes of highlights and watch the goals that had been scored at that point, and then catch up with the game. It was innovative things like that they brought in, which was really useful.
Sorry, Mark, who was the first with a PVR then?
I believe TiVo were first.
In the States?
No, in this country. But
really?
I remember TiVo being on sale before Sky Plus. Then also, Sky didn't help themselves. I don't know if anyone remembers some of the early advertising for Sky Plus. It was firmly in the M. Night Shyamalan school of production. It was incomprehensible, and it basically suggested that the box did it by magic. And people were like, do you know what? it took ages to sort of guess what the whole thing was about. So it was a bit of a short-sighted move, but obviously very important.
I mean, it shows you how important it was, because people referred to things like, did you Sky Plus it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe they weren't the first, but they definitely
certainly popularised it.
Yeah, totally.
But they weren't the first.
Okay. 2006 World Cup in Germany was the first tapeless events, a tournament. So everything was digital. There was a media server, and the broadcaster just accessed that to get hold of the footage. There was no analog or tape, recording at all. It was all digital. And then obviously moving forward to 2010. A little foray with 3D that didn't do so well. That was the first. The South African World Cup was the first and the last to be filmed and broadcast in 3D. And moving on to now, of course, we had Ultra HD 4K testing being done at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. This year, this tournament, the Euros in France, we've got I think definitely the quarters, semis, and the final and the opening match are all being broadcast in Ultra HD 4K. So depending on where you live, you'll be able to watch that in 4K. In fact, because some of the European satellite broadcasts already are broadcasting in 4K. Not in this country, unfortunately, not yet. But that's already a reality. That's already happened. So really, in terms of where we are at this point in time, we've gone from 405 lines of black and white 4:3 mono TV to widescreen Ultra HD. 50p, and let's not forget that's an important factor. If you can increase the frame rate and do it progressively, then you're going to get better motion for things like football, which is going to make a big difference in years to come when they move to 100 progressive frames.
And yet we still only have one commentary track.
well,
still have to listen to Robbie Savage.
Well, if you'd been around last week, AC4 is new technology coming in from Dolby, which gets around that, Mark, because then you can choose exactly what you want in terms of your audio streams, basically. So you could just listen to the crowd if you wanted, or you can have it in Spanish, Italian, whatever. Choose your different commentary teams. Have a fan commentary, or listen to the BBC, or listen to 5 Live, or whatever. I mean, that technology's coming. It should be quite good.
That will be an absolute game changer for me.
Yeah,
really will. I swear more at football commentators than at anyone else.
I have to say, I mean, I do hope this option is exploited with the enthusiasm that it so richly deserves. So you can have men in pub commentary. The other one that always struck me is obviously it would be expensive, so you'd only do it for significant events. You'd have to have commentary by someone that greatly dislikes the sport, but has just been paid to be there. So David Mitchell does the World Cup final, or so on and so forth. It's just like a team I don't care about.
I would pay to listen. I really would pay to listen to that. I think that'd be genuinely quite funny. Right, anyway.
Morrissey commentates on the Royal Gala.
Right, seriously, we need to move on because we're rapidly running out of time. So anyway, that's TV technology. There will be an article going up on the site during the week, so keep your eyes open for that in the run-up to the Euros. And coming back next, we've got some movie news. Okay, Steve, so films opening this Friday.
Films opening this week, and are not even opening on Friday. They're opening today, Monday, the day the podcast goes up, because it's become quite common now for films where maybe they're not going to be critically successful. They get them out early to get more box office for the opening weekend. So technically the opening weekend of these films is going to be from Monday to the following Sunday.
Is it not half term?
It's also half term, which
Yeah.
might be another reason, because these are kid friendly. So we've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, which is the second of the rebooted Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, produced by Michael Bay, so that gives you a good idea of what to expect, although it might be worth going to see just for the sight of Megan Fox in a schoolgirl outfit. And Warcraft: The Beginning, which is obviously the film adaptation of the Warcraft game, directed by Duncan Jones, son of David Bowie, who made the excellent Moon and the pretty good Source Code. He's a big gamer and a big fan of this game, which is why he's done the film. I've seen the trailers for it, and whilst it looks quite faithful to the game, I can't say that it's something I'd be queuing up to see personally. Maybe you have to be there, but I would have hoped for something a bit more interesting from Duncan Jones, because he's done two very interesting films already, and this seems like a retrograde step for him. But
that's quite damning from you with a free cinema pass. You don't even have to pay to see it. And
well, I tell you what, I was struggling this year. There haven't been that many films I wanted to go and see, and the films I do want to go and see aren't at my local cinema. Money Monster, not playing my local cinema, which is annoying. Not showing The Nice Guys, which I wanted to go and see next week. And so, they are, of course, showing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Warcraft, but I don't really want to go and see either of them, even for nothing. Although I have got the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the one before this, on Blu-ray, because it had a Dolby Atmos soundtrack.
That's not the original one. The original one.
No,
was
I meant
remember?
of this reboot as opposed to the previous films. Yeah, the previous Ninja Turtles.
I've never seen the 1990 version, but I do own the tie-in music with Snap on 7-inch single. So not all bad. And it's got a really bizarre B-side like Splinter's Tale, which is just like prog rap.
I actually remember that. I don't remember that. I'm sure I had that. I'm sure I had the 12-inch to beat your 7-inch.
Well, what can I say?
It's vaguely sexual, but
What did you regularly put it into your DJ sets? Bit of TRT out you power. And so on.
I'm sure it got a few plays here and there. I'm sure it did.
So anyway, that's your choices for cinema this week.
Okay, so Blu-ray releases. What can we go and buy?
This week on Blu-ray, actually, we got Goosebumps, which I have already seen. Again, bought it on US Blu-ray because it's got a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, an excellent Dolby Atmos soundtrack, I have to add. And I really enjoyed this. I didn't know much about the Goosebumps series of books. There was a whole series of kids' books, and they're quite fun, horror tales with things like, werewolves and vampires and Invisible Boy and this sort of stuff. And very popular with children. I'd never heard of them, but the film condenses all of these various books into a single story. So it introduces whole characters. The concept is quite simple. There's all these books that the author's written, and if you open them up, the characters inside become alive. It was really good fun. It has Jack Black in it, playing the author, and it was one of those kind of fun, slightly scary kids horror movies, if you know what I mean, and very much in the vein of Krampus, which we talked about a few weeks ago. And it had a bit of an 80s sort of vibe to it, but with modern day effects. And I thought it was great fun. And it has got a really good soundtrack. There's a whole bit when the Invisible Boy is on top of the car, and they use the overhead speakers for his footsteps banging around above you, which is really great. So that one I quite enjoyed, worth picking up if you like a good Atmos soundtrack as well. We've got the Peanuts movie. In this country, outside the States at least, it's called Charlie Brown and Snoopy, the Peanuts movie, just to make it clear what it entails. But it's the Peanuts movie that I have got an Ultra HD Blu-ray. Haven't watched it yet. Ride Along 2, sequel to Ride Along with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart. And Ride Along was pretty generic. Ride Along 2 it's got really, really, really bad reviews from, I think it was Kumari who went to see that, gave like 2 or 3 out of 10. So not great. And big release, as far as I'm concerned, is the remastered Independence Day on Blu-ray, which comes out this week.
Yeah, but you're not going to buy the Blu-ray because you're going to
wait
get
a week,
the UHD.
And then
Yeah.
it's coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray in the States, at least, in a week's time, with a DTSX soundtrack. So that's the one for me. But yeah, I'm quite looking forward to watching this again, because I did really enjoy it back then. I can't believe it's been over 20 years. But obviously this is coming out to time with the release of Independence Day Resurgence, which comes out, I think, on the 24th of June, so in a couple of weeks after that.
Who knew that Apple Mac could interface with alien technology?
Yeah, I know, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So ahead of its time. I still quite like the film, though.
Actually, we've managed to secure childcare, so it's the first film I'm off to see since Star Wars. Make of that what you will. As I said last time, I have no doubt it's going to be awful, but I think it'll be enjoyably awful.
And just to correct things from last week, seemingly Will Smith was offered the role. He just wanted humongous amounts of cash. So they said no. Seemingly.
That's fair enough.
Right, okay. What can we do Ultra HD wise, or is there nothing to report this week?
There isn't a massive amount of news this week. Obviously, as I just mentioned, Independence Day is coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray next week in the States. The Peanuts movie is already available if that's something that interests you as far as Ultra HD Blu-ray goes. What is probably the big news of the week in terms of technology is that the first triple layer Ultra HD Blu-rays have come out in Japan. There's been a couple of releases, Japanese films, but they use triple layer discs, which up until now haven't been used. They've all been double layer discs so far. So that's important news, primarily for longer films. So if you're thinking about something like Lawrence of Arabia on Ultra HD Blu-ray, you're going to need a triple layer disc. So that's a key piece of technology that's now in place, which is good news.
Of that, Steve?
That's 100. It's 100 gig.
Is it?
Yeah, 100 gig. So I think it's 33, 66, and 99. Yeah. Depending on the layers.
Will we be able to fit my Canada video onto one of them? Right, okay, let's move things on, because swiftly we're rapidly running out of time because we're talking about TV technology. But Star Wars news, we always have a bit of Star Wars news. So what do we have this week?
Well, unofficially, it's been confirmed. There's been some.
How can you unofficially confirm?
Well, there was basically publishers have been getting the early examples of various books that are being released at time with Rogue One when it comes out in December, and obviously these get released a lot earlier so they can print them and everything. And some examples of some of the books that are being created now, these sort of technical manuals and tie-in books, and there's all these various designs and equipment's going to be in Rogue One, and some of the pictures involve Darth Vader. So Darth Vader, it's been rumoured and semi-confirmed for quite a while that he's going to be appearing in Rogue One. And it would make sense, given when it's set and where it's set, that he would be there, because he was clearly involved with the construction of the Death Star anyway. And it's pretty easy to include him as long as you've got James Earl Jones to do the voice. You just need a big bloke in a suit. So yes, Darth Vader should be in Rogue One, which is, I think, great news.
Well, he is the lead in terms of trying to find the plans, isn't he? Because that is the whole opening of A New Hope.
Them, isn't he?
Yeah, so.
I mean, really hard to make it without him, frankly. And obviously a lot easier than resurrecting Peter Cushing. So, yes, a bit like Yoda being in Episode 8, it's the obvious solution to a problem when the other actor you could choose is dead. So Darth Vader in Rogue One. Episode 8 apparently will feature a big fight between Jedis, well, at least Luke and Rey, and some Knights of the Ren with Kylo Ren. They've been shooting in Ireland for the last few weeks, so there's rumours of that going on, which sounds like quite exciting. I'll be up for that. And one for you, Ed. The Force Awakens is coming out on vinyl with holograms.
Yeah, I saw. I've re-listened to the soundtrack on Tidal. Don't get me wrong, it's a lovely, lovely piece of packaging, but again, I'm about buying records to listen to. Well, with the exception of what I am last weekend. It's a lovely thing, but I just wasn't that excited by the score to actually buy it. So yes, and as I say, I did a fairly expensive error on Saturday. I was at a record fair, and there was a copy of Fatboy Slim's "You've Come a Long Way, Baby" on vinyl. Now, it's not a very common album, and it was knackered. It still is knackered. I mean, I negotiated the bloke down from 25 quid to 18. which did make it the cheapest copy in the UK. But obviously, I played it and it's knackered, so it's like, what on earth do I do with this? So I've got to reconcile that. So, but I mean, it's good to see it. I mean, it must have said you can buy. There was a box set of the original 6 films with their soundtracks on vinyl.
I was very tempted to buy that just to own it.
It was a beautiful thing, but also it must be said, whatever the limitations of the prequels, their scores were genuinely good, and they complemented the original 3 films very nicely. So that's all good. I mean, I say there's nothing wrong with the Force Awakens score, but it's not that to me it didn't have any.
I think it's a grower. I didn't like them first.
I really like it. I think Ray's theme's the highlight. Yeah, totally.
Excellent. There's some good stuff on it.
Yeah, really good. And the vinyl with the holograms, or the Falcon and the TIE Fighter.
That always reminds me of the Spitting Image album, which had all of it was, with one exception, all of it was just stuff from the TV programs. But at the end of side 1, it goes, we'd like to report an error with this record. It says, in the center of this record, you can see a hologram of Ronald Reagan. This is a mistake, and it should say, in the center of this record, you can see a hole. The words "ogram" of Ronald Reagan were added without our consent, which I thought was quite nice. But obviously, if you listen to it on any other format than vinyl, it didn't make a huge amount of sense. So there.
I guess you had to be there, Ed.
Yeah.
And just another thing that has started, it's into its 3rd episode now, is the Star Wars show, which is, it's a bit light, but there's been some interesting things there, and I love their theme tune as well. I think the way they do the theme tune and the voice Yoda outside ILM in San Francisco, I think is brilliant, opening sequence of it. But it is a bit light in terms of actual details. But interesting that they're doing that now and having their own weekly Star Wars show. So if you need Star Wars stuff, you'll find it on YouTube in the Star Wars channel. Anybody else watched it?
No.
Yes, I did watch it. And I agree, it is a bit lightweight in places. I could do without the Chewie mum or whatever her name is. That's really annoying. The interview with Duncan Jones, though, was quite nice. Obviously, he was plugging Warcraft, but he's a massive Star Wars fan, talking about that. I love the way that when they talk to Duncan Jones, or if he's ever mentioned, no one ever mentions the fact he's David Bowie's son. It's just like, he's just, which I kind of respect the fact he's not called himself David Bowie or Zoe Bowie, as he was unfortunately named as a kid. And just trying to make his career on his own back, but it's quite cool that David Bowie was your dad. It's worth mentioning occasionally. I'll keep watching the show though, just in case there's any nice little tidbits as we move into Rogue One.
I think
6 months away now.
Yeah, there's some nice little Easter eggs in there as well, with backgrounds and models and stuff on show and that kind of thing. So it's interesting to watch for that. Okay, so that's Star Wars news. Has there ever been a decent adaptation of a video game as a film, Mark?
A lot of people like the Resident Evil films, and I think as a medium it works better when it's translated to animated films. So you had Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. You've had an anime version of Tekken. There was a decent prequel to the Dead Space series, but in terms of live action, they all tend to be fairly awful. Although the original kind of terrible hammy Street Fighter, and I think the original Mortal Kombat, I think they made decent money, but other than that, live action seems to be a bit hit and miss. So, but you've got the Assassin's Creed movie coming out. That's got a decent cast, Michael Fassbender in it. So it'll be interesting to see how that does.
I've got to say, I'm going down the list that was provided on the runner order, and obviously we'll put this into the thread that goes with the podcast as well. But I'm looking down the list of games that have been made into movies, and how many of them have I seen? And probably Resident Evil is the only one out of that list.
I've seen a depressingly large number of them, actually.
Yeah, but we kind of knew that was going to be the case.
Although
Steve.
I'm also surprised the list is as short as it is. I could have sworn there were more adaptations. Actually, there aren't that many, I mean, relatively speaking. And some of them haven't been adapted yet, although they are on the way. I mean, Assassin's Creed, Mark just mentioned, with Michael Fassbender, that could be interesting. Uncharted, I mean, that's currently lined up to come out in 2017. I'm amazed they haven't done that already, given that it's kind of got that Indiana Jones feel to it, and the action adventure seems it should be something that's relatively easy to adapt to a film. Sonic the Hedgehog's looking like it might be coming in 2018. Again, I'm amazed they haven't done a Sonic the Hedgehog yet. But looking across the list, I own Wing Commander.
Lara Croft, own Wing Commander? Yeah.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
Say that with pride.
Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I got that on Blu-ray. I've never watched it. I've watched like the first 5 minutes of them just see what the picture quality was like, and I never got much further.
It manages to be both really stupid and breathtakingly dull at the same time. In many regards, it's a singular piece of filmmaking, just not a good singular piece of filmmaking.
Anyway, Lara Croft Tomb Raider Cradle of Life, got that.
Need for Speed. I've seen that. I saw that on the plane. I thought it was the most reprehensible piece of crap I've ever seen. I mean, none of the characters you'd like.
I do have to say, I will come clean here. I actually really like the Resident Evil films. I've got them all, and I really enjoy them.
I mean, I think it's telling that list begins in 1993 with Super Mario Bros., which was terrible, and it's not like it particularly picked up at any point from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just have to look at the casting, don't you, on that one?
I don't know. It got some bigger names into it than many of the masterpieces on this.
Street Fighter was Kylie Minogue not in that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, there she was.
I've just bought Hitman Agent 47 because that's Ultra HD Blu-ray.
Mortal Kombat, doesn't that have Christopher Lambert being completely incomprehensible as usual? Yeah. Yes. And then Doom. I mean, Doom, again, has actually got some quite reasonable actors just looking so sheepish.
Is Doom The Rock? Is The Rock in Doom?
I believe so.
Maybe I should get that then, yeah.
It's got Dexter Fletcher and Carl Urban, who I normally have quite a lot of time for, but it's...
You're selling it to me now. It sounds awesome.
It sounds awesome. I can assure you it's not.
I quite enjoyed Prince of Persia, actually. Sands of Time. I thought that's quite good fun.
Do you know what? I think done correctly with the right people and the right director, I think you could make an absolutely brilliant Monkey Island film. I genuinely
that's a good point.
But it would need to be done by someone completely happily immersed in the whole construct. I think it could be really.
That would have to be almost like a Monty Python film.
Correct. Yes.
So come on, Mark. What's your suggestion for a game?
Shenmue, duck racing, forklifts.
Forklift, yes. No, that's a good idea.
Goat throwing. What's the game where you throw goats? That looked quite good fun.
Goat Simulator. No, or that's something different.
I think almost anything can be made into a decent film. I think it's a question of where the people who are making these things, who are translating them for the screen, come from. This is why kind of the Warcraft film might be a success, because you've got a kind of a pedigree there in film beforehand. Whereas with a lot of things, it's been made by kind of passionate gamers who've tried. U-Bol was a guy who made House of the Dead,
Rain.
Alone in the Dark. Yeah, as you said, Blood Rain, Postal, Far Cry, and some people said he kind of poisoned the well.
Well, isn't he regarded as the worst director since Ed Wood? So
yes, I think he's. Yeah, I think he's. Who was he offered to fight? Is it Michael Bay or someone?
Yeah.
Several times. He's called himself a genius. Genuinely mad at this point. And it's people now associate kind of video game adaptations with being terrible. I think the problem is they kind of languish with poor scripts for a long time. They end up in development hell. They don't get funding. And for most games with a kind of, because of the nature of games traditionally to this point has been to have a strong aesthetic, because consoles up to this point haven't been able to really kind of evoke truly photorealistic graphics. To replicate that in film form, you need a decent budget. And so if you try and kind of half-arse it, you end up with your kind of, like your live action Street Fighter and stuff like that, which just look poor. But now that you're getting stuff like Uncharted, then that kind of translates just naturally. And things like Assassin's Creed, you just think, well, all you need to do is pick the right sets for the historical settings, and you're virtually there anyway. And that's the appeal of the games.
Have you seen the trailer for Assassin's Creed?
I have.
Interesting concept of how they're getting Fassbender into different time periods, presumably within the same film. It's a sort of a time travel aspect, isn't there? So it's.
Yeah, I thought the trailer kind of shot itself in the foot, though, with number one, the music, and number two, that no one can ever mention the phrase the Spanish Inquisition without thinking of Monty Python. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay, let's flip this on its head just to wrap it up, Mark. What films have translated well into video games?
Well, your obvious choice would be GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, take source material, build level design around that, utilizing the elements, but don't try and follow exactly kind of the script. You know, point 1 to point 2 all the way through. But there are some games some films that kind of feel like games. If you look at something like The Raid, that felt like like someone had made a film of a video game. Someone going through levels.
Edge of Tomorrow or Source Code. Thinking of Duncan Jones again. If you watch Source Code, it resets. It's a very similar concept, and you could definitely make Edge of Tomorrow into a game very easily, couldn't you? The entire concept of it is very game-like. And if that had been an adaptation of a game, it would be easily the best game adaptation ever because it's a great film. But yeah, that would probably work in the other direction quite effectively.
You sometimes watch some of these animated movies and you can see the actually thinking of the video game and some of the sequences. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I've been to several with my kids and thinking, oh, no, that's going to be in the video game. That bit's going to be in the video game.
Take that to the next level with the Matrix sequels, where the Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions were shot back to back, but also Enter the Matrix, the game was designed. It turned out to be a crap game, but it was designed at the same time, and they shot actual cutscenes for the game that actually tie in with the storyline of the three Matrix movies as well.
Yeah,
which I think included on the Blu-ray.
No, for me, there is only one film when it comes to the Matrix, and the rest of that universe, it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned.
Disappears out of his own arse, doesn't it?
Yep, basically. And on that bombshell, if you've got any suggestions in terms of games that you want to see made into movies, or movies which would make great games, and you can obviously leave your comments in the thread underneath this podcast. But that is it for this week, so my thanks to Steve Withers.
Bodacious.
Ed Selley.
So the rat, it has a name.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Where did they come up with this stuff?
And Mark Botwright.
Ninja Vanish.
I didn't even get it. What did he say?
Ninja Vanish.
Does that mean he's gone now?
Yeah, he's just thrown down one of those percussion caps.
Walked out of
Run off.
Yeah.
If I have to explain it and walk back into the room, it doesn't really work, does it?
All right, let's
Look, guys, that was my exit.
Okay, drop the mic. Off you go. Right. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and video, and of course, leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes. You've got a whole month now. Go and leave it. It has to be 5 stars, and we'll read your name out on the podcast. Can't say for other than that. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening. And don't forget, we will see you again on the 20th of June for the normal podcast. And in between that, we have the 2 interviews. And when we come back, we're also coming back on the same day as Mark and Steve share a birthday. And of course, England will have exited the Euros by then, in shame. We'll see you when we come back.